Welcome to episode 2 of Fire Recovery. We wanted to continue our story about our challenges with addiction from a support side, from a parent side, and from a kid struggling with addiction. In our last episode, we gave you a little bit of an overview of the history of what we've been through over Jordan's challenges with addiction. And so today we decided we'd go a little bit more into that history and talk about how it all started and where it led us. And so that Jordan, in our last episode, you talked about that 16 is, I think you mentioned, is when you had your first drink, and then it kind of started to just continue to build from there. And I honestly don't think I've ever really heard the story as to how did we go from, I know as a parent, we were always, for years you talked about go to BYU and go on a mission, go to BYU, go on a mission. And then all of a sudden one day I noticed you weren't saying that anymore. And then, time led on to where we were concerned about maybe what you might be doing. But I don't think I've ever really heard the story as to where to go from wanting to go on a mission and go to BYU to maybe your first drink to ultimately ending up in rehab 4 different times. So I'd like to kind of break that down a little bit more and understand, because as a parent, I've constantly struggled with what could have we done differently. And I don't know if there is an answer to that, but I'd like to hear maybe a little bit more of your story.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an answer to that either. I guess the BYU thing started, I was kind of brought in by family to being a BYU fan and playing football and stuff. And that's what I wanted to do, is go play college football for BYU and go to the NFL and go pro and all that. And that started really young. And like the mission thing was kind of put on me as well through family and then who we grew up around. And that was something kind of everyone that we were around was doing. And, there for a while when I was young, I did want to go. And then, I changed, honestly, I changed my mind on that. Before I started drinking a ways. It went from me considering it to more of just saying I wanted to go to please you guys or whoever it was. I knew a long time ago, probably around the age of 13, that I probably wasn't going to go, and I didn't really want to. But I still did. I still was a huge...
I didn't realize it started that early.
Yeah, I decided long before that I didn't want to go. I'm not really sure if there was something that caused that or what, but yeah. So I still after that I still wanted to play football and go to BYU and do all that stuff. And then as time playing football, and then as time went on, going through, I kind of got away from the football scene a little bit. Coming into high school, I remember we weren't on a very winning team, and I kept getting, as quarterback, I was getting smashed all the time. I didn't have a very good O-line, and so that kind of started to deter me from wanting to play a little bit. When you, especially being young, when you're losing, kind of is very cuts your motivation down for that. And so that was about the time I started getting interested in other things like rodeo and stuff like that. And moving on to 16. By this point, I had kind of, over the course of like 14 to 16, I had kind of started losing interest in going to church and stuff like that. And I went mostly because I felt like I felt like it was just the right thing to do to please family and the ones around me. And so I almost felt like if I didn't go, I'd be looked at differently or treated differently, which I don't know if it's the case, but that was my perception then. And then so it went, so that went on for a couple of years. And by the time I hit 16 and all that stuff happened where all of your money was froze, and as a family we really struggled through that time. It was about time I'd gotten into blue collar work, and it was something that I started kind of been around for a couple of years. I hadn't really had a want or an urge to start drinking, but then I'd gotten curious about it, being around it. And we were working a job outside of town, and a coworker was drinking some beers one night, and that curiosity was pretty heavy that night. And so I tried me and one of my other friends had our first beer that night. And it's kind of weird because a lot of people remember like the first time they got drunk or really like the progression from the very first time they drank. I remember my first beer vividly, but I don't remember a whole lot after that. Like, I don't remember the first time I got drunk. I don't remember how much I was drinking back then from that point. The point from having my first beer to by the time I was in high school, chugging beers before class with my friends, I don't really remember like the whole from then to the party scene. Yeah, it's just a blur, and I'm not sure why that's escaped my memory, but over the course of 2 years of treatment, I've tried to remember it and I just can't. And I'm not sure why that is, but so my memories pretty much went from having a beer to a year and a half later partying like crazy in high school and literally shotgunning 6-7 beers before I went to class in the morning.
And this was, how old were you? Still this 16, 17?
Yeah, 16, 17,
Okay.
same age. And so, like I said, I don't remember the point where I like got drunk the first time and had that head change. Like, whoa, like it was just like, it was like all of a sudden I had a beer and all of a sudden I was just partying, and that was like the way it was. But I did find, with everything going on in life, I did find alcohol was my friend, and partying was my friend because it was my escape from reality. And at this point, I still was able to function. I was still able to, hold the job down. I was fairly successful for a kid my age, and so I didn't even look at it as a problem until like until not too long ago. And so it not being a problem, me trying to justify, I was successful over here materialistically wise. And as soon as I started drinking, I quit going to church because I didn't want to be that kid that showed up to church and did his duties while living a different life. I just didn't want to be that person. So I just went from kind of one lifestyle to the other. in a very short period of time. And and yeah, that's drinking beer before class. And I even had a teacher that knew about it, that didn't really care. She actually kind of got a kick out of it. And so being around, those party friends and having certain people co-sign my behavior, that it being a problem wasn't even a second thought in my head. And, and I was just having fun. And I didn't even look at it as escape from reality at the time either. I was just partying, having fun. And I remember so my group of friends changed very quickly too. I had a small group of friends that that were active in the church before, that I hunted with and did certain things with, and a couple of them actually we kind of transferred over to another friend group and different lifestyle around the same time. But I specifically remember, I don't remember exactly when, but I remember a time where a specific friend and a teacher I had from before, that had known me before I'd kind of switched up my lifestyle, had came to me concerned about the road I was heading down. And they actually met me. They kind of showed up randomly while I was standing in the garage working on one of my trucks, and brought up their concerns, and I was instantly upset about it. I was like, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Like, I have, look at me, I'm doing this and this and this. I'm materialistically successful and, in certain ways ahead of a lot of people my age. And so who are you to tell me what to do? And at that age, I thought I knew everything. And they talked to me for a while, and I just completely shut them down. And it actually, we didn't talk for a long time after that. It pretty much ended the relationship there, and it's never been the same since. And I just kept doing what I was doing, and at that just progressed to having parties at your house while you were out of town. I always made sure I
It's
cleaned
something
up.
I've learned just recently, and I'm shocked that we just didn't even know.
I'm shocked
We never
too.
had a neighbor
The neighbors
call
were my
us.
best friends during that time.
We never had anyone let us know, and apparently there were large parties that went on at our house while we were out of town, and somehow we never knew. And I sit there and think, how was I oblivious to all this, And, you were born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I grew up, and we moved here to St. George, mostly because the gangs and the crime was pretty bad in Albuquerque, and we felt like it was safer here. But we also had a little bit of a naive feeling, I guess, of like this would be this safe bubble of Mormon community, and so the kids wouldn't be exposed to a lot of the things. And in some ways, I think it might have been worse, because in Albuquerque, I was one of only 5 kids that were members of the church in all of my high school. And for a while there, we felt like we had we needed to stand up, and we knew people were watching us, so we were a little more careful. So it's, here it doesn't seem like where we thought was a safe haven actually wound up you were a lot of people to find to do what you wanted to do.
Well, I actually got a kick out of that to some point, and knowing that I was able to hide it to a point because of how extensive it was. Like there was one time I thought we were going to get caught for sure, where I set up a party here at the house, and I hadn't even shown up yet. By the time I was driving into the neighborhood, there were cars parked outside of the cul-de-sac. And I was like, what the heck's going on? I pulled in, and there was cars lined around the entire cul-de-sac all the way out, and they were all all here. And
This is the first time hearing of this, so not quite sure how I.
So anyway, I pulled up, and that one I just kind of accepted the fact that we were going to get caught for sure, but somehow we didn't. But I got a kick out of being able to have something like that happen, and then still be able to keep it down low enough to where, like, really you guys didn't even know what was going on at the time.
I feel kind of stupid right now thinking about it. I had no idea.
Well, and that's, as an addict, that's one of the things we're best at is manipulation. And
would you call yourself an addict at that point?
No. If you told me I had a problem at that point, I would have given you the middle.
No, but thinking back, or were you an addict?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just all the behaviors around it. Yeah, I was absolutely abusing alcohol. But if you would have told me then, I wouldn't have been happy with that.
So I guess two questions I have is, one, take me a little bit through that, going from these parties here, obviously, that were going on to where you wound up to your first entry into rehab, and then also maybe the question that's constantly in my mind: what should have we done differently? Is there any, in hindsight, is there anything that we could have done differently?
No, there was nothing. There was nothing you guys could have said or did that would have made me do anything different. At least me personally, I was going to do what I was going to do. You couldn't tell me what to do. And that came from, I think, having our lifestyle ripped away from us. I was a lot of fear, and I was going to do what I was going to do. And that's the way it was. Like, what would you say? When was the first time you guys suspected anything?
It's hard to remember. So much blurs together, but I think I remember at least a time where you were throwing up or something, and we're like, we kind of suspected a few things there, but I think you actually came home when we were throwing up in the toilet, saying that you were sick, and I was telling Mom, I was like, no, he's drinking, and she's like, no, I think he's just sick, and like, no, he's drinking. I think as I recall, but like sometimes it's difficult because so much is a blur now.
So we had a bonfire. That was other times we drank a lot. We had a bonfire above a neighborhood, and the police got called. And I had just bought a new truck, and I wasn't gonna leave it up on the hill.
Of course, when you got arrested for DUI, that was a little bit of an obvious thing, but I think there was a little bit before that. But yeah, how old were you when all of a sudden we got the phone call?
So I was 17. That's the cops got called. I just bought a new truck, and I wasn't gonna leave it up on the hill, so I was gonna drive down to my buddy's house in the neighborhood and just leave it there. And on my way to his house, I got pulled over, and taken to the police station. I was 17, so they didn't take me to jail. They called you at, I don't know, 3 a.m. to come pick me up.
I think it was like 1 or something like that in the morning, 2 a.m. Then we got the phone call that we have your son. He's been drinking and driving, and they wanted us to come pick you up. And I remember seeing you sitting in handcuffs, and
well, and at that point too, the thought of me having a problem wasn't even a second thought in my head. It was, I just got caught, and that was just, I never stopped. I like a couple days later, I had alcohol poisoning. At that point too, remember Mom almost took me to the hospital because I was so sick. And And at that point, you couldn't have told me I had a problem then either. I just drank too much that night, you know. And so, you know, I got a DUI. Still didn't even think about trying to live a different way. My mind went to, I just need to be more careful so I don't get caught. And that's addictive thinking right there. You know, when you can't see the problem, and when something significant happens, your first thought is to just, what could you have done different to get away from it, rather than what could you do different to not create a situation where you'd be in there in a situation like that. So yeah, so we went through high school. I don't think I smoked weed one time in high school at like a livestock show, and then shortly after I graduated, I moved out to New Mexico for a job. You know, and I got sober for like 30 days just because it was me and one other guy that were opening the market out there. And then as soon the second other employees started coming in from out of town that drank and smoked weed and did other drugs, it was game on again.
And it just started going downhill from there.
Yeah, and that's when I started smoking weed a lot and drinking quite a bit still. And then, you know, I moved back, and, you know, same habits, drinking and smoking weed were a thing. At this time, I just looked at it like just a party thing, or a weekend thing, or an occasional during the week thing. Meanwhile, I was smoking weed every single day. And then that's not too long after I'd come back is when I broke my back riding dirt bikes. And that was funny because I remember having injuries when I was younger with the pain pills, and I didn't like taking them. Even when I shattered my jaw when I was 17, I didn't like taking them. I always had leftover ones, and when I broke my back, I didn't even go to the hospital or the doctor right away. I waited a week and then found out a week later. And I still wasn't on pain pills at that point until, I don't know, a couple months later. I was able to get a script from my doctor, and now this was after I talked about in the last video where a friend and I had taken a couple extras that I had for fun. And then not too long after that's when I went seeking out a monthly script, got that. You know, and then like a year and a half later, I had surgery on my back. And then that's when I got put on a monthly script of, you know, it started out a little less, but at the worst of it, I was getting 100 oxys a month. And
is that what you were prescribed?
Yeah, I was prescribed
100 oxys a month.
100 oxys a month and liquid morphine at a time, every single month.
And you were how old then?
20, 21.
Which I think one of the things I'd like to talk about in upcoming episodes is the fact of how kids, teenagers, break an arm and get an injury, whatever, have a surgery, and they just pour the opioids to the kids.
Well, and I did have a lot of doctors that told me no, and I went doctor shopping specifically for the reason to get more. And I did find a doctor that would give me whatever I wanted. And so once I found that, you know, not too long after that, I got physically addicted to those. Then once the mental obsession kicked in on that, by the worst of it, you know, within a year, I went from taking them fairly as prescribed to to running out in 5 days. So that would be, I'd be out of the liquid morphine and 100 oxys in 5 days. We're doing about 20 of them a day plus the liquid morphine.
How much?
20 a day. And then that left me from, obviously I'd withdraw from that point until my next script. And so I would spend the rest of that time trying to buy off the street. You know, I started off buying pills, though I'd never touch heroin. I started off, I'd never drink from back before. I'd never drink. Okay, I'll never smoke weed. And then started doing both of those things. And then it's easy to take prescribed medication. And so I justified it as it was prescribed. There's a part of me that knew what was going on then, but like I blocked it out. And then it went from, you know, wow, I'm buying pills off the street, but I would never buy heroin. And then my dealer was out of pills and just had heroin, and I was sick and I couldn't even function. So I bought heroin for the first time. And so it went on like that for a few months. And then I got caught with heroin. I got arrested for it, possession of heroin. And as soon as something like that happens, the doctor legally has to cut you off your script. And so I went from taking those high amounts to no script. And so the rest of the month was, or well, every single month throughout the entire month and all through the year was doing what I could to have enough money to support my addiction, support my new baby at home, pay the bills, and try to run a business I had started. And you know, it was just trying to run the business and the stress of a new baby, and just kind of watching my life fall apart at the seams. Too terrified to look at my part in it. I just fell into victim mode, and I was always done wrong, and everything. I just got dealt a bad hand. And
Would you say that, so, you know, obviously you said you were drinking and you felt like you were an addict there, but would you feel like the cliff really started when you got the prescription pills, and
yeah,
that's where where it really went off the cliff?
yeah, because I was a functioning addict until the opiates came, and then I was completely incapacitated after a while. Like I just couldn't function. And
I think that's something that through this whole process, one of the things that I've talked to other parents about is the fact that don't let the doctors give your kids opioids right off the gate. It seems like soon that's the first step, you know, and you know, do everything you can to avoid that and not just go straight to that as your first thing, and watch that, because it seems like you take one pill and they feel normal, feel better, you know, and this depression and anxiety, it seems like suddenly that's their quick fix. I think that's maybe something we can dive into a little more, and as I see this transition from, like you said, you know, I'll drink, but I'll never do marijuana. And then suddenly, I did a little marijuana, and then I've got prescription pills, so they're prescription, and then can't get those, so it becomes heroin, and then it goes to fentanyl, and then pretty soon you find yourself in detox and rehab, and arrested twice by this point. One for DUI and now one for heroin.
Yeah, at that point, yeah.
Well, I think maybe what we ought to do is dive a little bit more into, you know, that spiral of doctor shopping, the pills, and then I think into the rehabs, and what, as you've gone through the different rehabs, what have you learned? What can maybe make it be a faster process for you at this point? I don't know.
Yeah, and if there's something these videos can do to stop somebody and open their eyes before they have to go down that route, all the power to them, because It's a long road.
Yeah, it's been a long road, both sides. I would say maybe let's look at that for the next episode and see what we can come up with.
A lot to unpack.